Chapter 24, Jingle Bells, Batman Smells, etc. December 2002. Just because December was lights on contacts, that didn't mean we didn't have any. Things were happening with Rudy that forced us to keep in touch. On the 6th, I got a call from Bad Bob. He was hearing distressing things about Rudy, but he wouldn't discuss anything over the phone. He suggested I come to a Mesa Toy Run, a community outreach event that collects toys for charity on the 15th. I told him I'd like to, but I couldn't, since the larger Solo Angels organization was holding a mandatory toy run on that same day in Los Angeles. He said he understood that my first loyalties were to my club, but we still needed to get together. He suggested an earlier dinner on the 11th. I said I could be in town on that date. It was set. We'd been hearing the same distressing things about Rudy too. Apparently, he'd been very chatty with fellow inmates, dropping Bad Bob's name to gain some prison credibility. Slats went to interview him on the 9th. He found out that Rudy'd been telling people that his crew, that is, us, were running tight with the Angels, and that Bob told him we were going to be offered a patch swap, a full transfer with no prospecting, period. Such a thing is very rare. The Hells Angels don't toss death heads out like candy. At the interview, Slats told Rudy in no uncertain terms to shut up. Nothing about the Angels, nothing about the Solos, and most definitely nothing about the ATF. One usually doesn't have to remind an incarcerated informer that it would be unhealthy in the extreme for him to admit to working with the law. But given Rudy's track record, Slats wasn't taking any chances. Rudy promised to keep quiet. They sent him back to the cages, but had him moved to a single to help him stay quiet. Jails are like bee colonies. News travels very, very fast. When Rudy was pulled, it didn't take long for the population to hear that the ATF had pulled him. And when he was returned in protective custody, PC'd, it didn't look all that great. We hoped that by segregating him, experienced prisoners might conclude that he hadn't cooperated and was being punished. But it could cut the other way too. Some might think he was being isolated for his own protection. Either way, Rudy Kramer got the message. He clammed up. Bob and I had a lovely dinner at the Baseline on I-10 at the Waffle House to discuss this. Waffles for me, cheeseburgers, fries, and a vanilla shake for him. Bob was visibly worried about what Rudy was saying. He didn't think Rudy was going to snitch. He just thought he was being Rudy. But that didn't make things any better. He asked if I'd heard anything about the patch swap rumor. I told him no, and that I'd never dreamed it was a possibility. He changed the subject, saying he couldn't understand why Rudy, a man who'd been to prison, was so eager to impress people. He said he was not cool with Rudy abusing his good name. Bob chuckled as he told me that he'd heard all of this secondhand from his longtime brother and friend, Phoenix Angel Howie Weisbrod, who'd gotten it from an inmate who went by the moniker Trash Can. You have to love the self-esteem these guys convey when they've left to pick their own nicknames. I mean, ain't that ironic, Bob said, jamming fries into his mouth. I'm supposed to be Rudy's best influential buddy, and I'm hearing about it through a guy Rudy doesn't even know, just because Howie knows the guy Rudy's mouthing off to. Fucking Rudy, man. Bob said not to worry though. He said, I won't hold the Solos accountable for Rudy's shit. You have my word on that, but you might want to chill out a little. I know you guys been doing a fair amount of business around the state, and that's fine. Man's got to do what a man's got to do, but take it easy. Rudy's popped. You got that crazy fucking traffic stop. What I'm saying is you're on the radar now, just like us, so take it easy. You don't need the attention, and we certainly don't need the attention. He wedged a quarter of the cheeseburger, which was already half gone, into his mouth. You got to meet Howie anyway. I told him about you, and I also told him not to think about this Rudy guy too much. I told him once he met you, he'd understand everything was cool with the Solo Nomads. I said, thanks, no problem. He swallowed hard and took a long, silent pull off the milkshake. As he pulled away from his straw, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Anyway, we both know the patch swap thing Rudy's bullshitting about is just that, bullshit. But that don't mean we're not interested. I know you've been come at a little. He shoved the remains of the burger into his mouth and licked each fingertip on his right hand. Well, I'm here to tell you that shit's likely to increase. I'm gonna bring you guys up at the next officers meeting. Ask how everyone feels about the solos coming in as prospects. Once we come to a consensus, I'll tell you how to respond to all the love letters you're gonna get. He smiled at me and slurped the rest of his milkshake into oblivion. I finished my waffle, pounded my coffee, and paid the bill. I thank Bob for everything once again. Don't mention it, Bird, you're my boy. We stood and walked to the door. I held it open for him. There's one more thing though. I want you to go talk to Rudy. Go talk to him and tell him to shut the fuck up. Cause sometimes people who can't keep quiet, they get hurt. I thought this is probably the kind of conversation Joe Pistone had with his Bonanno associates when he was Donnie Brasco. Bob acted, spoke, and thought like a mobster. I lit a smoke and said, "Don't even need to ask, Bob. Consider it taken care of." Which, in truth, it had been. Pops and I went to the Solo Angels toy run in Chula Vista, California on the 15th. It was no big deal. We hung out with Teacher, made sure the local news crews got us on tape, and took some trophy shots with our brothers. We drank some beers and listened to some good Latin music. I was happy for that. If I never heard a Leonard Skinner song again, it would be too soon. We had other solo business on that trip. Our club dues had to be paid in Tijuana. The problem was that Mexico was not in Black Biscuit's jurisdiction. Sovereign nations aren't too keen on having unknown foreign undercover agents poking around in their backyard. Since Pops was our paid informant, he didn't need permission to travel to Mexico in his undercover role. He used to make this trip with Rudy, but since Rudy was indisposed, he'd have to cross the border on his own. As we got closer to the border, Pops got more and more apprehensive. Within a few miles of the checkpoint, he turned to me and said, "Bird, this has got me spooked, man." He didn't want to go to the Solos clubhouse alone, and I couldn't blame him. What I decided to do, I've since regretted. Not because I thought it was wrong to help Pops, but because it was a completely rogue action. One that I, even a documented risk taker, should not have undertaken. I decided to go with Pops into Mexico to conduct work without Work's permission. I didn't intend to go to the clubhouse. I just wanted to be in the area should Pops get in trouble. I told him to call me after 30 minutes, and if I hadn't heard from him by then, I'd come rescue him. I wouldn't leave Pops alone, out of his comfort zone, to be eaten by wolves. We crossed the border and parted ways. I strolled around drinking cola, smoking cigarettes, and turning down offers from everything from sombreros to blowjobs. 30 minutes passed, no call. 40 minutes passed, no call. 45 minutes, no call. Went to the clubhouse. Pops was fine. He was better than fine. He told me he tried to call, but it kept going straight to voicemail. I looked closely at my phone and realized I had no service in Mexico. Great. Dumb. Pops said, "Chill out, Bird. These guys love us. Come on, let's party a little." He was actually eating the taco. I kept up appearances. I met a bunch of guys, had a beer, and got roped into a game of pool. Between turns, Suzuki, the Tijuana president, approached me and said that the next time we came, he wanted us to bring him a Harley Sportster engine. He also reminded us that we had to change our Nomad's rockers to Spanish Nomada. He said, "I don't want none of this gringo bullshit." I gave him a hug and said, "Sure thing," with no intention of complying. I hoped I'd never see him again. When my pool game was over, I grabbed Pops and told him we had business in San Diego. He got the message. We left. We walked through the streets. I told him I felt like an idiot. He told me to relax. I couldn't. I put myself in a completely losing situation. I lost if I had to attempt an unauthorized undercover rescue. I lost if, after the fact, I told Slats, since this would likely end the case. I lost if I didn't tell Slats, knowing that one day I'd get found out and be held accountable, knowing that my unauthorized action could seriously jeopardize our credibility in a courtroom. I lost because I knew that the longer I kept my trip to Mexico a secret, the worse it would be for me. But I did it anyway, and I kept it secret for a long time. We returned to Tucson nervous and unhappy. It was right before Christmas. I dropped Pops off at his house and waved at his wife in the front yard. I told him I'd be back in a couple of days to drop off some stuff for the holidays. He said thanks. The words were for the presents I'd be bringing his girls, but the sentiment was for covering him in Mexico, even if he really hadn't needed it. Then he said, "Sorry, don't sweat it, Pops. Feliz Navidad, okay?" Okay. I wasn't the only one sneaking around that holiday season. Slats had been doing some underhanded stuff himself. When I got home, it was the same. Gwen standing on the porch waiting for me so that she could get out of the house to get some shopping done. But this time, she was in a good mood. She said, "When I get back, you'll help me wrap presents, right?" "Of course, G." "Good. I have a surprise for you, too." I went inside and found our skiing stuff laid out in the dining room. It turned out that Slats, his wife, and Gwen had planned a trip to Angel Fire Ski Resort in New Mexico, kids and everything. When I found out, I didn't think, "Hooray, family vacation." I thought, this is going to take me out of the game right when I need to be staying close to the guys. The truth was that the Hells Angels were becoming my family, and even though I told them I'd be out of town on a collection, a holiday disappearing act could arouse some unneeded suspicion. But the kids were ecstatic that we were going away together, so I told myself to swallow my pride and buck up. If I couldn't have actual fun, then I'd pretend to. We were leaving on the 20th. We had a few days to get ready. The Dobbins family ran a clothing and toy drive of its own every Christmas. The kids piled their old clothing on the dining room table. Then they had to go into their rooms and select no fewer than 8 toys for donation. It wasn't a tradition that they were too excited about, but it was a good lesson in charity. When everything was together, we boxed it up and took it to our church's donation center a few days before Christmas. Every year I told them, "Don't worry, kiddos, it'll make you feel better when you're all grown up." They trusted me enough to believe this. I'd asked Pops if he wanted first crack at the goods. He was making decent money, but no one ever got rich as a paid informant, especially not as an ATF paid informant. I told him I didn't want to offend him, and he said he wouldn't be offended at all, that he'd do anything to make his daughters happier. I promised I'd bring him some good stuff. Dale helped me out by being kind enough to add 2 new stuffed animals, some unopened CDs, and some fresh makeup. She even insisted we wrap the nice stuff, which is what we did. I went over to Pop's alone on the 19th. Short visit. We hugged in the driveway. He brought his wife and daughters out. I gave his wife a gentle hug and leaned down to say hi to 2 smart, beautiful girls. I knew the girls did well in school, and they were always polite and presentable. The girl said, "Thanks, Jay," and took the box inside. Pop's wife said, "Merry Christmas," and followed them in. Pops reached inside his windbreaker and pulled out a CD. It wasn't wrapped. He handed it to me. I was a little embarrassed. I hadn't gotten him a present. I hadn't even thought of it. "Thanks," I said. "Don't worry about it. Listen to track 3. It reminds me of you." We hugged and wished each other Merry Christmas, and I left. The band's name, 3 Doors Down, was written on the CD in permanent marker. A sheet of paper had the song list. Track 3 was titled "Be Like That." I put it in the player and hit play as I pulled onto the freeway. It was a rock ballad. It started with a guitar riff, the lead singer coming in quietly, slowly built to a full chorus, and a drum of thumping bass and crashing cymbals. Then he lies awake and wonders, why can't that be me? Because in his life, he's filled with all these good intentions. He's left a lot of things he'd rather not mention right now. But just before he says goodnight, he looks up with a little smile at me and says, "If I could be like that, I'd give anything just to live one day in those shoes. If I could be like that, what would I do? What would I do?" I started to cry. Damn, that Pops, God bless him too. We convoyed to New Mexico. The Dobbinses in one car, the Statas in another. It was an 8-hour slog, but with all the driving I'd been doing, it felt like nothing. Jay sang Jingle Bells, Batman Smells, Robin Laid an Egg, and the rest of it over and over. We sang along with the family initially, but after 10 repetitions, it was just Jack. I told him to zip it, which he did. We pulled into a truck stop for lunch. Slats' kids jumped out of their car and Dale ran to join them. Jack took his time, walking with the adults. I looked at him. He was uncharacteristically quiet. Gwen asked if he was okay. He smiled and said, "Yup." Not 15 minutes later, Jack walked up to Gwen and tapped her knee. He was as green as seaweed. I stifled a chuckle. Slats grabbed my wrist. Jack moaned, "Mom, I don't feel so good." Grabbed her purse, pulled it open, and barfed directly into it. I hoped it wasn't an omen for our trip. We cleaned him up and hit the road again. After puking, Jack managed a PB&J and felt much better. He started singing again. The little guy couldn't wait for Christmas. Dale kept pestering Gwen for details of that year's presents. Gwen said, "I'm not going to tell you, Shuey. And besides, you know Christmas is about more than presents. The presents just remind us that we're luckier than others." Dale whined that she knew all that. Gwen told her to sound more appreciated, and Dale wisely chose to drop it. I didn't engage in these discussions too much. I checked my phone constantly. I'd miss calls from Smitty and Bad Bob. The missed calls made me anxious. I felt I needed to be with them, massaging their egos and ingratiating myself. I decided to turn off my phone. Sitting in the car alone with my family for 8 hours for the first time in months, maybe even a year, it dawned on me that I put myself at complete odds with myself. The part of me known as Jay Dobbins felt guilty, while the part known as Bird was angry at Jay for feeling guilty. The Slatalas had rented a condo with Angel Fire, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, a nice, small outdoor hot tub. We settled in. Slats and I got Lyft tickets, while the girls and the kids went grocery shopping. On our way to the ticket offices, Slats and I agreed to keep the case to a minimum. We both knew that we needed to chill, and that we needed some exposure to our old, more regular lives, Slats said. "Nighttime only, after everyone's down." I agreed, nighttime only, and added, "at the bar." Most definitely at the bar. Slats made a big breakfast every morning we were there. The first day, it was cheese and scallion eggs, toast, bacon, OJ. The next was pancakes. The day after that was French toast. After that, poached eggs with homemade hot sauce. It was a regular short order superstar. I joked that if this federal agent thing didn't work out, he had a future at the Waffle House. He said, "Nah, I'm too good for the house." We stayed for 6 nights and 7 days. The kids got along great. Dale was the same age as Slat's older son, and Jack was the same as his younger. We spent 3 or 4 hours a day on the slopes, trying to stay together. I'd constantly challenge Slats to race to the bottom, and he constantly refused them. It didn't matter. I went down, hell-bent, on shorty skis with no poles. I liked them because I could do anything on them. Their only drawback was that I looked more like a monkey on sticks than like Bode Miller. Each run, I'd be the first to the bottom, where I'd wait patiently for everyone else. Slats would be last, carving graceful arcs through the powder of parabolic 210s, making sure everyone was down in one piece and not horsing around when they shouldn't be. Then we pile onto the lifts and do it all over again. On Christmas Eve, after the kids went to bed, I snuck out to the back porch and called Smitty's house. I lit a cigarette while the line rang. Lydia answered. She wanted to know what I was up to. I told her Big Lou had sent me on a collection around Santa Fe. She asked what kind of Scrooge works on Christmas Eve. I told her if Big Lou said the word, I'd shoot Santa in the knee and take all the world's playtime swag off the back of his sleigh while he rolled around in the snow. Lydia just said geez and told Smitty that Bird was on the phone. We spoke for a few minutes. He said everything was fine, good holiday. I said mine was as good as could be expected. Gwen came outside as we talked. She looked at me, then at the cigarette in my hand, then back at me. I gave her a wild-eyed look. She shook her head and went back inside. If I'd had a shred of decency, I'd have felt ashamed. Instead, I was relieved she was gone. I hung up, smoked another cigarette, and went back inside, where a game of Scrabble was warming up. With Slats playing, I knew I had no shot at winning. I played anyway. On Christmas Day, the kids were up at the crack of dawn, and the coffee was brewing. The sound of 3 boys tearing in the wrapping paper and 1 girl carefully pulling apart folds filled the living room. Their energy was infectious. I started wadding up the wrapping scraps and throwing headshots at the kids, and before I knew it, we were in a full-tilt Christmas Day wrapping paper fight. That wound down, and I played hide and seek with the younger guys. I was the seeker. Slats made breakfast again, and we ate, and then we hit the slopes. That night after lights out, Slats and I went to the bar. Since it was Christmas night, there wasn't too much going on. Mostly lone wolf locals and resort workers boozing after another day. We talked about the case's next step. We agreed that whatever it was, it had to be something that would really knock the Angels' socks off. I suggested we bring them a show of force. We decided to orchestrate a solo Angels Nomad run in Arizona, where every solo who showed was an ATF special agent. We decided to roll hard and deep and show the Angels what we were all about. This worked in the Slats' operational direction of maintaining the solos, and without conceding anything, I knew it worked to my advantage too. If the solos came in and proved we were a solid club, then Berg would gain that much more credibility, and I'd become an even more desirable Angels recruit. As far as Slats and I were concerned, this idea was a win-win. We put the case aside for a while and talked about the week. I thanked him for making it happen, saying that if he hadn't, the Dobbins clan would be sitting around our living room staring at the walls. He shrugged as if to disagree and changed the subject. He said, "Earlier today, I was thinking about how we ski. As usual, I'd spend the day racing to the bottom while he enjoyed the sound of the breeze in his ears and the snow-covered pine trees lining the slopes, or whatever it was that he did. What about it? Well, you know how you race down and fall and get up and race forward and tumble some more and get up and race forward again? Yeah, if you're not falling, you're not skiing hard enough. Yeah, well, you know how I cut from side to side and glide and check everything out and make sure everyone gets to the bottom in one piece? Sure, you're slow, I get it. I was just thinking we have opposite styles, but in the end, we both get down to the bottom of the run at about the same time. And then we both ride up to the lift together. One's really not any better than the other. That's all I'm saying. It's just how we are. Yeah, I guess you're right." We clinked glasses and ordered another round.